Hey guys, Mochi here, and we're back with the Forestcraft Steel Rebellion Take 2 Draft Infographic update. I'm going to start things off differently by just covering over some changes to the bronze picks, not even going over the Steel Rebellion cards yet, because there's actually an important shift that sort of happened in Steel Rebellion. Forest actually lost quite a bit of its value cards, but it got a few replacements in Steel Rebellion, but the main thing is it didn't get a lot of good aggressive tools in Steel Rebellion, and a lot of crafts got better cards to help deal with sort of a flood of 1/1s. So if you might notice, a bunch of the fairy generators and just aggressive 1-drops are down. Stuff like the Water Fairy, the Refuge, and the Fairy Circle, all these have sort of moved down, mainly because there aren't a lot of good combo stuff in the pool that you just want to hoard a bunch of fairies for. Stuff like the Selwyn's a very defensive drop, the Sky Horror, it's too gimmicky to sort of get off. It got better with a certain card, but it's still a bit jank to sort of go for. And the Cleft, which is something that's probably like one of the best things to really get off of it, isn't really a very rewarding payoff. We have stuff like the Tia and the Lena and Lena. These things naturally just go off in the late game, and it doesn't really matter if you get them off or not. They're still like reasonable cards. But if you're just drafting it for those sort of cards, it's not really worth just drafting a ton of generators. And on the flip side, if you're drafting a lot of these, most of the time you have to play them out just because they're very low tempo. So you're just playing a bunch of fairies to sort of make up for the turns you skipped or the play points you missed by actually generating them. So that usually works out if you're an aggressive game plan, but like I said, a lot of crafts got cards, specifically Evo-specific 2-drops. Think stuff like Portalcraft, Shadowcraft, and Dragoncraft. Those crafts got really strong 2-drops that really help deal with just a flood of 1/1s. That it might not be viable to just go primarily to an aggressive game plan. That Forest sort of wants to fall back to more of a value mid-range game plan. And there's another card in the pool that actually came in Steel Rebellion that sort of pushes you towards going for that game plan as well. Anyway, I'm going to go to the golds and legendaries now, starting with Arya's Whirlwind. This might be a little weird just seeing this down, but it's a consequence of also these cards sort of falling down, like your Water Fairies, Fairy Whispers, Refuge. If you're drafting less of these, then this card's not very good, because if you're just drafting standard 2-drops and 3-drops, what's going to happen is you're going to try to combo this out. You play like 2-drops, 3-drops, and maybe a fairy or two, and then it's going to AoE everything that's not your fairies. And sure, that might be good if you're a really defensive combo deck, but like I said, there aren't too many like really big combos to shoot for. In Constructed, you just put this in sort of maybe a combo roach deck in Unlimited or something. Just something that you're trying to build up to a combo. The opponent is forced to pressure you on board just because they're scared of the combo lurking in hand. And then you can just blow them up by playing like a bunch of fairies / fairy wisps. And then you have like a bunch of random stuff on board alongside a premium AoE. But in Take 2, if you don't get a lot of these, you might be deferred from drafting a lot of these. Then what happens is you just have standard drops that you drop them down. You have a clunky AoE that's pretty dead in the early game. And even in the late game, you have to have good setup to sort of get it off to be like a really premium AoE spell. But it can work in like some super control-y deck if you end up getting you have to have a high value deck that also has a high amount of generators, and that's sort of hard to balance out, because the more generators you have, these are like relatively low value, low tempo. You have to have like a very, very premium plays to sort of make up for that if you're like hoarding fairies in hand. And for like the aggressive decks that can actually generate a lot of fairies that don't really penalize you, then they don't really need this sort of effect, because they're just banking on just winning the game off flooding on board. So for that reason, it's like down here. All right, next up we got the Cleft. This card's pretty interesting. It's like a rain / metallurgist. It's got both other sort of like clauses on them. Just a basic combo. If you combo this, play 2 cards before this, you'll get both of these. But first, let's look at the Fanfare. It pings based on the Machina cards in your hand. A thing to note is, I didn't mention this in the Swordcraft video, is all the cores are actually Machina cards. It didn't really matter for Swordcraft, but it matters for crafts like Forest, where they have cards that care about just standard Machina cards in your hand. So anyway, this thing will ping for 1 or 2, maybe if you have like the Iron Bow or a Mecha Lance in hand. But this isn't really consistent. Like getting the combo early isn't really consistent either, because you have to have 1-drops in your hand or draft 1-drops, play a Whisper, and actually be able to keep the fairies in hand for like a turn 4 play. Similarly with the Evo, it's like a rain. You can Evo ping for 2, but you also have to have the combo for it. Maybe it'll go for like turn 4 or turn 5. If it goes even later, it's sort of hard to get off, because turn 6 and onward, you probably want to Evo something mid-range, something big if you have something premium for it. And generally these bodies aren't big enough, but it can work. It's mainly the inconsistency thing. It makes it generally just sort of a filler fighter card that you sometimes get a bunch of upside from either just getting the combo for it alongside having Machinas in hand, or just using it sort of like a pseudo ping Evo that you have to sort of work for with like 2-drop, 1-drop in this, or 1-drop, 1-drop this. Alright, next up we got the Cynthia. Let's take a moment to sort of appreciate the Island Whale stat line it has. 6 play point, 5-7, Evo into 7-9. That's really good in Dragoncraft, and it's extremely good in Forestcraft, just because they generally have some really small bodies, and you get all this upside alongside it. So this is like the free Reina ping. You can inherit the Evo onto something else. If you have something on board, you can just Evo that, and then you get the free aura effect, which just spawns 2 wisps. Or if it's in the early, like if it's earlier in the game, like turn 6, turn 7, you might still have an Evo, and you can just Evo this card, and then you still get the same sort of benefits. It spawns 2 fairies on its own, and it'll be a 7-9, which is enormous stats for just trading into anything, being really annoying on board, and just pressuring a lot, because 7 damage to the face is nothing to scoff at. And just having split board and additional threat, if you have like another body on board, you can still give the Evo to the thing, but you can still Evo the Cynthia, and that thing can Evo the next turn. So the opponent will have to deal with the Cynthia and just deal with that body, and just deal with the fairies / wisps spawns. Minor thing is the fairies and the wisps, they don't really matter. Like maybe you can like bounce one of them, and like you can get some wisp combo or fairy combo, or maybe there'll be things that buff fairies / wisps in the future. But either way, you're just getting 2 1/1 bodies off it, and you're very happy of just split board and really premium stats. This is definitely going to be one of the higher go-to picks in the Golden Legendary pool. Alright, last up in the Golden Legendaries, we got the Mechalance Elf. A thing to note is this is a Machina card, so Technolord can resurrect it. And of all the things that Technolord can resurrect, this is actually one of the most premium cards you can resurrect from it. 7 play point, 6-3 rush with a pseudo sort of Rakam / Odin effect. This is a lot different than that. It actually is more like Michelle, except for it doesn't lose its stats, because it just unkillings the thing and reduces it to 0. For the most part, this will trade in and then kill whatever. Most things don't have more than 7 defense. But the thing to note is this doesn't stop clashes. Clashes will happen alongside this. So something like a Ceres will actually kill this, unlike something like an Odin or a Rakam where they ping before the clash happens. This thing will reduce it to 0. So when this happens, the opponent will clash back. So something like a Ceres will definitely kill this, so something to be wary about. But something this card does different than Odin, which is a comparison you might want to draw, is this thing actually hits in for damage while trading. Odin has to sort of choose, like, you're not going to really indicate this out for the most part. So just 4-3 Storm, you either choose to go face if you're trying to pressure your opponent out, or you make up a really good trade by just trading in and getting the free ping 4 / ping 6. This thing, it can trade in. It'll trade in, let's say it hits a 2-drop or a 1-drop. That'll do 4 or 5 damage alongside it, because any excess damage this does will be hit to the opponent's face. So this is actually reach potential alongside just good trading. So this sort of makes it better in a sense than sort of the Sky Horror and the Lena Lena if you can't get these like super combos off from them, because this thing is a control tool that can also give you reach. So that's something that's really high value in Forest. Again, there's like the minor Technolord thing, there's the minor it being a Machina tag, but just 6-3 rush with sort of immutability when it's trading, and just reach potential is all things you really want. Speaking of Lena and Lena, there aren't really too many changes in the Golden Legendaries, like globally with anything. Like you might want to like take Proto higher, Prince higher if you're like building a control deck. But Lena and Lena, just standard good stuff Storm card. You'll pick it a bit higher than Sky Horror just because it trades better in the mid game and combo potential in the late game. And the Babes, obviously, alongside Mutera, just one of the highest premiums you can get in the Golden Legendary picks. Alright, moving on to the silver picks, we got the Arboreal Core. I mentioned this earlier with like the Sky Horror, or what you can do. You can actually do a really cool sort of pseudo combo if you have a Whisper or a Fairy Circle. Some things you might want to be drafted, like the Fairy Whisper is still fine, but maybe the Circle may be less wanted. But if you'd end up drafting these things, you can play this alongside a Core, and this contributes 6 to the Sky Horror combo, because this is three cards in one, and this is also 3 cards in one. But it forces you to Evo one of the Fairies / Whispers, and then you still have to have a card to follow up. But that's not too much play point investment, but it is sort of an investment, only to get like a 13 stat Storm, which will basically win you the game. But sometimes you have to get enough chip, and you're doing a lot of anti-tempo stuff in order to get to that. But other than that, let's just look at the card on its own. A rule of thumb for the cores is it's only as good as the minor effect is, because you're not playing 7 for just recover Evo point. And just playing it as a 3-drop, what'll happen is you'll play it. The problem with this card is just putting it on 3 or putting it on 7 isn't really good, because you're putting it out, and the things you get from it is basically 2 1/1s. Like I said, combo isn't really a big thing in the pool anymore, so you're really just trying to curve out with just 1/1s on board. And if you play it on 3, the next turn you play something Evo it, what'll happen is you can only play 1 Fairy Wisp, because the Fairy Wisp clause is if your combo count is 2 or more, or the cards you played is 2 or more, the Wisp will banish itself. So you're only getting a 1/1 out of the deal. So it's not really good on 3. And on 7 onward, you can play it down, get their Evo point, And then you still have to wait to get your wisps. And the next thing you play, same problem. If you play this and something else, your wisps are stuck in your hand. Maybe like you can save the wisps for like a sell win combo, but that's like niche, just drawing this and just drafting these just for like a defensive combo. But other than that, like we don't have too many good combos in the pool that sort of benefit you from having wisps. So just playing the wisps after playing this card isn't fast enough, so it's not really worth drafting. Like all these silvers are just either vanilla plus followers or just good spells, so there's no reason to sort of draft them over this unless you really, really value the Evo point for some reason. I'm just gonna cover these changes really quick. The Owlbear, it's technically still here, but you can bump it up just because sure, there's like the niche Azudia combo, but mainly just Retribution being gone. It's decent enough reach that's like, it's not Storm obviously, but it hides really well and it trades decently, and you can still like get a lot of damage off it just because it's very safe to play down now. And the Mark of Unkilling just got a bump up just because Whisper is gone. Just good value. Banish removes a bunch of threats that really big stuff is really hard to deal with in Force sometimes if you don't get the right answers for it. So just drafting this as one of, sometimes you get the niche like Michelle or just random unkilling premiums to sort of kill stuff, but just getting a free 6-drop big AoE, or not AoE, big removal spell, sometimes something you want to lean towards, especially because it's not in the bronze picks, so, and if you miss out on the slashes, you probably want to have just one in your deck just in case you run into those sort of big threats. Alright, next up we got the Iron Bow Sniper. If you've played Machina Blood, you know that this effect actually triggers on itself, unlike some other things which might not be intuitive. So this is a 4 play point 3/3 that pings for 2, and I think that's all you need to really say about this card. It fills in the hole of just some really good premium 4-drops that you can just play in Forestcraft and not really care about it because they have some really good Evo 4-drops. You can just drop this whenever, going first or second. You don't really care about it since you can just throw it down. You'll always get value from it, just helping something trade or just pinging something off. And as a minor bonus, it can always ping for more. Like you can get the Bagworm combo, play that, play this, and then ping for 4 or more if you're like really lucky with like Mechwing Angels or like Robogum, just random stuff on board. But other than that, you don't really care. It pings minimum for 3, and you're very happy with just 3/3 average enough stat line that helps you just control down board or stay even on board. Alright, last up we got the Nature's Warden. This card is probably the biggest push for Forest to play sort of a controlling game. You actually cannot play this card very well if you're a strictly aggressive Forestcraft deck. If you think about this, like if you were building a constructed deck, like if you were to put like any of these 5-drops in, what would you pick? You would definitely pick Hornet Soldier just because it's a really good 5-drop, it's a good 7-drop, 8-drop, and it's good like super late drop because you can combo and get both of them. But like Nature's Warden, it's not very good in turns 5 to 8. Sure, it's like 4/5 ward above average for like vanilla, but that would be like rated something like here. You're playing this because you want like the super premium top deck or super premium wait till turn on, and you get the double like pseudo jungle warden sort of effect where you summon it and then you get the free stun on an opponent's follower. So that's super premium. But if you're playing an aggressive deck, I said it's not as strong in this sort of format, but you can still like draft the decks. You could end up with decks that end up being aggressive. So if that's the case, then Hornet Soldier is definitely your sort of safest 5-drop to go with. But this has like the strongest potential upside just because it'll be an insanely strong top deck in turn 9+, just because you play it down. It's just 2 4/4 split boards, and then you can stun an opponent's follower, and it's really hard to remove. Like you have to waste like premium removal, like 5-drop, 6-drop removal just to kill one of them, and the other one sticks on board. Maybe you can like guidance it or something and do it again. But other than that, like just really premium stats. 8/10 split body on 9. It's faster than a Jungle Warden with like the clunkiness attached to it, but it's definitely good enough. You'll love it in your value decks, and you'll consider it in your aggro decks, but you should definitely consider the Hornet Soldiers as well. They're still very strong. Okay, so last up we got the bronze picks. I covered the changelog about here already, so we can just go over the new additions. So the robotic bagworm, it's got a bit of clunkiness to it. Mainly you'll pick it if you want a 1-drop, or right now you don't really care about the marking tag. It's mainly just this, that it just boosts it a bit, but it makes you pick sort of a dead card, and this pinging for 2 or pinging for 4 doesn't really matter. If you really want a 1-drop and you miss out on the Lillos and the Water Fairy, you probably still shouldn't pick this card. Unfortunately, this like sort of discount effect doesn't carry over to a turn. Like it would have been slightly better if you could like maybe discount a core or discount a Mechalance, and then it would carry over to the next turn. But unfortunately, the discount doesn't last. It only lasts for the turn you play it. So mainly it's sort of like a 0-cost Machina card if you play a Machina aside it. But like I said, that's mainly for either just comboing out or just tempoing people out on board. you're just picking one drop. You can already like weave out curves good enough with like fairies and like standard better one drops. So no reason to sort of pick this up unless you really desperately want a one drop to sort of start the game on turn one, and you don't end up getting this or even like the standard fairy generators. All right, next up we got the Forest Tournament. This card's very interesting. It'll sort of be like a bit higher now because, or this expansion, just because Iron Bow is so strong and it's pretty easy to draft, and you can always draft like a Mech Lance as well, just because of boosted rates. But as the expansions go by, this will definitely be like around here or here. It's mainly just the targets you can draft for it. Like if these are your only targets, like this can fetch these as well, or like the Amulet. But if these are your own targets, it's not a very strong card. Like you're paying it to be like a raise. Like you sacrifice a bit of tempo on board in order to just tutor something strong into your hand. And like these cards are definitely strong enough. If you draft like two or three targets, and you can draft like one or two hermits. It's worth to note if you only have like one of these sort of cards and you draft the hermit, you can still miss on it if you draw one of those cards, and then this card ends up just being a 3.22 that doesn't do anything. So it is worth like considering not drafting this as much or at all if you don't have too many Machinas, or any at all, of course. So it's sort of like balancing the scales. It has really high upside if you have like 3 or 4 copies of these premium effects, but if you only have like 1 or 2, maybe you want to just draft one or not draft it at all. All right, next up we got Nature's Guidance. So a rule of thumb with bounce cards is they're only as good as their cost/secondary effect, and this one's actually decent if you look at it, a 1 play point to draw a card. But unfortunately, bounce in this format right now isn't just very worth doing. Like if you look at the amulet sort of things, the amulet things you can bounce aren't really that good. They mainly just draw you cards, and you're just drawing more cards anyway. You can just leave them on board, and they'll either draw you cards or give you effects. Like the best thing you can sort of do is like bounce a Genesis of Legend. That's not very common. It had the same problem with Brambles when that was super premium. You draw the Nature's Guidance late, or you draw the Brambles too early, and then the Nature's Guidance wouldn't bounce it. And sometimes it wasn't even good. And then if you're bouncing followers to either reuse fanfares, you're either bouncing one drops to like just get the cycle off like really inefficiently, and then you'd have to replay the one drop, because combos right now there aren't too many combos that you really want to play, or that aren't really worth building up to. So other than that, you could just bounce a bunch of fanfares. The problem with that is really small fanfares don't have high impact, and really big fanfares, while they do have impact, they cost more to play. So you're just anti-tempoing yourself. Maybe you can make a good trade, bounce it to hand, play it again, get the premium fanfare. That's like super good. But in most cases, you're just sort of on board, and you're just sacrificing a lot of board position, and then you're just playing the card again. And while the fanfare might be relatively strong, it might be worth just playing like a standard big drop or standard average drop and keeping that follower on board to just keep up the tempo. Because regardless if you're an aggressive deck or a controlling deck, no deck really wants to sort of bounce something like premium to their hand unless they're like super far ahead. And if you're super far ahead, you can just play whatever else, and that should win you the game. Speaking of something that you sort of want to play when you're really far ahead, the Daisy Bow Archer. This is the Evo specific 2-drop that every craft gets minus Rude. So this card's very premium. Let's looking at it as a 2-drop first. Just a 2 play point 2/2. You're very happy to pick those. We got some really good vanilla ones now, but this one just adds another piece to the puzzle. You just evo something alongside it, and then you ping for 2. It's got the random unfortunate clause of just pinging something random. So sometimes it'll be like a 2-drop and a 4/2 living, and you'll be like fairy this, or like 2-drop in this. You'll evo, and then what'll happen is it'll ping the wrong thing, and then you have to crash in and then trade with the 4/2. So sometimes that's unfortunate, but it doesn't matter. Like sometimes it's sometimes it's controllable. Sometimes you'll get lucky and then ping the right thing, and then it's super premium when it works. And then as a bonus, it's like an elf tracker on 7, where it's a 5/5, which is good enough stats. It's actually pretty strong for a Forestcraft card. Size-wise, anything above 5/5 that's like 6 play point or higher is just a very strong body that dodges 4 damage removal. So you're happy with the stat line, and then you get 2 pings, and then it's controllable with just fairies on board, random 2-drops on board that help you trade away with stuff. And even if you ping one thing away, it's super strong. It helps you snowball a board or just take back or control a board, and you're very happy to just pick up a bunch of these because it's no opportunity cost. Just play it as a 2-drop, get it. Play it as a evo on your evo turns, or play it as an enhance. So just really good flexibility and just really solid options regardless of when you play it. All right, I guess that wraps up the Forestcraft cards, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.